Hello everybody, I'm going to be talking to you today about compulsive behaviors. Compulsive behavior, as the first slide suggests, is performing an action in a compulsive manner, so repeatedly, whether it presents us with some benefits or not. Compulsive behaviors can be caused by stress, by everyday stress, by traumas from the past, or in infancy, or as we're growing up, a recent event even, but it can also be caused by spiritual influence or obsessions, and it's acts that a person cannot control. If they could, they wouldn't be doing it. So in the second slide, examples of compulsive behavior, we see that, for example, people who are engaging in this kind of behavior, they might drink too much because alcohol and other drugs as well, they have a kind of a numbing effect that helps the person to feel a bit more in control and to sometimes block or numb the thoughts, that the compulsive thoughts and feelings that drive the person to behaving in that way. They might eat too much. Again, it's a way of finding control in an emotional life that is out of control. Obsessive compulsive disorder is a classical example of that, where people sometimes, they might wash their hands compulsively. They will flick the light switch on and off many, many times, like hundreds of times sometimes, before they're able to go out. The problem with this kind of behavior is that when the person has this kind of disturbance, it feels that this is a way to manage the behavior, to manage the emotions, but of course it is not. It just increases it reinforces that part of the mind that says you need to do those unreasonable things to feel good about yourself. And again, unfortunately, even though there are psychological issues, mental health problems that can explain these behaviors to a great extent, a large number of people unfortunately develop these patterns because of spiritual influences. And we're not just talking about full-blown spiritual obsession, which is quite serious, but we are talking about the whisperings in our mind of, you need to do this, oh, if you have this drink you feel better, if you need to check the oven because you left it on again, whether it is true or not, and it becomes the reality in that person's mind, because in reality we are where we think. So if you're thinking fear, then we live in fear, whether the fear is real or not. So there are ways in which we can learn to manage those compulsive behaviors, and rather than going to minute details of what causes it and how detrimental, how damaging they can be, I thought that it would be more useful today if we concentrated most of the time we have in looking at how do we manage it, how do we make it easier for us. Because we all go through stressful times in our lives, and it's easy to develop patterns of behavior that are not useful to us, that are stressful, that reinforces the stress. And if we are doing that, then we naturally attract people who will try to take advantage of it. And in this case, people, I mean discarnate spirits that may try to take advantage of us. So mindfulness is very popular at the moment, and basically it means bringing the mind back to the present. So for example, in especially compulsive behavioral patterns, the mind, our thoughts are often in the fear of what might happen in the future. If I leave the oven on, I might set fire to the house. If I leave the door unlocked, someone will go in and burgle my home. If I don't wash my hands 20 times, I will carry on germs that will kill all my family. So we're not talking about reasonable things here, like for example, we are in the middle of a pandemic and we're being encouraged to wash our hands frequently. That's reasonable. There is a reason, and the number of times and the occasions where it is appropriate to wash our hands is explained. But people who engages in compulsive patterns of behavior, they will wash their hands excessively until the skin is raw, until they're causing damage to themselves because of germs that are imagined rather than real germs that are causing illnesses. Okay, so mindfulness are techniques, uses techniques that brings the mind to the present. And it doesn't matter what the root cause of the problem is. If it is caused by a spiritual influence, or if it's caused by a mental health issue, or caused by present or past traumas and stressors. So think about mindfulness as bringing the mind to the present. It involves noticing what is happening in the moment using our five senses. So I will talk a little bit more about the exercises that we can do, but I often tell my clients, my patients, to identify a happy memory. And it can be a memory of a lived experience, like a beautiful holiday that they have gone to, or an imagined memory that they create for themselves. And that memory needs to have as much detail as possible for it to work. So think about, five things that you can smell, five scents in the air, five things that I can see, the birds, the trees, things that I can feel with my sense of touch, the heaviness of the soil beneath my feet, how the texture of a tree trunk feels, the feel of water running through my fingers. If I'm walking on a beautiful beach, then how does the sand feel on my feet? How does the water feel as the waves come in? All this detail help to fill in mental space and activates different parts of the brain. If I'm thinking, remembering how it feels, the texture of a tree trunk compared to the texture of a leaf, a green leaf on my fingers, or the texture of water, it activates the memory, the part of the brain that engages with that memory. It activates the tactile senses, and it will activate the nerve cells to remember, because our touch, our sense of smell, they remember experiences that can then be experienced emotionally as well. Okay, so it is the opposite of being on automatic pilot. When we are engaging in compulsive behaviors, we are in the automatic pilot. We don't even notice the triggers for the feelings, the thought pattern. So we need to switch off the automatic pilot and switch on our reasoning brain to be able to determine and select which memories, which feelings we want to engage with. So some tips for managing stress, on the next slide. Be honest about your feelings. If you keep pretending that something is not causing discomfort, that relationship is not making you unhappy, that you're not having that headache, that you're not hungry, that you're not tired, that you're not struggling with your mood, with depression, with anxiety, then how are you going to look for help? How are you going to identify the help? And then we become a pressure cooker, and compulsive behaviors develop as a way of letting out steam. So having that drink at night, it relaxes me. But then if one glass of wine or half a can of lager then becomes a bottle of wine, a crate of lager, then that's not going to be helpful anymore. Get support. There is no shame in getting support. If I want to build a house, I'm not going to try and build it myself alone, because I don't have all the skills necessary to help me build the house. I will need to get all kinds of trades experts to help me build a house, the bricklayers, the plasterers, the electricians, the plumbers. So get help. There is nobody needs to try and solve all our emotional and mental health problems alone. It's not a sign of strength, it's a sign of denial. And if we are in denial, then we can't find the right help. learn that it's not necessary for us to be perfect. We don't need to be perfect. Even in Spiritism, there is this demand of, we need to be like Jesus. Nobody's going to be like Jesus in one incarnation. All that is asked of us is that we make an effort, that we try, and we need to appreciate the small successes that we achieve in a day, in a lifetime. We're not going to fix everything in a lifetime, all the mistakes we did in the past in a lifetime. So we need to acknowledge and celebrate the successes that we achieve in this lifetime, the small changes, and let's look after our spiritual needs as well. We clean our teeth every day, we shower every day, and yet, when it comes to looking after our minds, our souls, we are so neglectful of that. So let's look after our spiritual needs as well. Let's look after our minds. Let's give ourselves mental breaks during the day, several times a day if necessary. I often tell my patients, go to the loo, go to the bathroom, close the door. It's a wonderful, especially if you live in a big family, it's a wonderful place because you can be on your own and nobody questions what you're doing there. And if you're there for a few minutes longer, nobody's going to question that. So it's a great place to go, sit down for a couple of minutes, take a deep breath, and relax. And this is what I'm going to be mentioning on the next slide, some techniques for managing stress. So breathing exercise is a great way. We breathe all the time and we never notice it. So this is about noticing your breath. Take a deep breath in. Pause for a moment. Let the breath go out. Pause for a moment. With the breath in, imagine positive, healing energies. Notice how nice, how relaxing it feels. With the breath out, breathe out all the tension, the stress, the anxiety, and notice that. Sometimes 2 or 3 rounds of breathing like that is enough to help us come down again and ground ourselves. So grounding ourselves is being aware of not just the stress, but how other parts of my body feels, how does my mind feels, what have I done today that was good, that made me happy, what happened today that put a smile on my face, where do I want my thoughts to go rather than on the stress. And we can break those vicious cycles of stress by just doing something that simple. Notice the thought, notice the feeling, name it. If I'm angry, pretending that I'm not angry is not going to make me less angry. It might make me more angry because now I'm angry with myself that I'm not taking action as well. So say, I am angry, I am frustrated, I am depressed, I am anxious. That doesn't mean that I'm going to give in to those thoughts, to those feelings, which means is if I have the name, I can try to look for the solution. A good exercise is to then remember the last time, especially if it's an ongoing pattern, if it's something that suffers from chronic depression or chronic anxiety, is to remember the last time that I felt really good about something, or that I felt less depressed. What was happening then when I was feeling less depressed? Is there anything that was happening then that I can mimic now? Be open about our feelings. There is no shame in struggling. There is no shame in having mental health problems. There is no shame in needing help from others. I advise people, especially people with very, very severe depression who have a history of suicide attempts, and knowing that when we are feeling really down, it's difficult to even articulate that to friends and family who absolutely want to help us, to agree when we are well on a keyword, the warning word. So it could be a color, it could be the name of a bird, it could be anything at all, or a number. And if I text that number or if I say that word, my friends, my family will know immediately that I'm really down, that I need extra help, someone to come and sit with me for a few hours, someone to phone me and make sure I'm okay. So think ahead of time to look for the solution. Then we need to know that the problem exists, so ignoring it's not going to help us. and identify areas for change. We are all able to change things in our lives. Nobody is set, problems are not set in stone. They didn't develop overnight, and they are not going to be solved overnight. So ask yourself, what are the things that I cannot change? We cannot change the way other people behave, but we can change the way we respond to their behavior. We can identify coping strategies that help us to cope with the behavior. When we're talking about spiritual obsession, we cannot change sometimes the mental attitude of the people who are attacking us. What we can do is to change our mental attitude towards ourselves. If they are attacking us because they think we did them wrong in the past, the best we can do in this life is to say, I'm sorry, I acknowledge that I wasn't as self-aware as I am now, I made mistakes, but I am going to forgive myself and forgive you for what you're doing to me now. And I'm going to move on with my life. I'm going to look after myself. I'm going to be kind to myself. These are the things we can change. We might not change the obsessor, the abuser, the boss, the way the children behave, the way the strangers on the streets behave, but we can change the way we respond to it in a way that is healthier for ourselves. And start small. A lot of the times when people make to-do lists and wish lists about how they're going to change, they start at the top of the list with the most difficult task, that thing that's going to take them a whole lifetime, if not more, to solve. Start with a small thing. Today, I'm going to try and complain about life a little bit less. Today, when I identify that I'm feeling, I'm in that vicious cycle of negative thinking, I'm going to think about a bird or a flower that pleases me. I'm going to picture a color that, brings me some happiness and comfort. I'm going to call a friend, start small, and value that small change. So it's not impossible. Sometimes it is difficult and challenging to change certain well-ingrained patterns of behavior, and whatever the causes of it, our past lives, our traumas or difficulties in this life, spiritual obsessors, the fact is we have more control over our minds, our thoughts, and our biology than we give ourselves credit for. But if we identify that every little grain of sand, every little small change builds up that structure that becomes a pyramid, a massive, amazing building, and value that grain of sand, then we will be feeling that we are making progress. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be part of this event.